Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jonathan Su here with Zerion Software and iFormBuilder. And thank you for joining our May webinar for community form building, where we take a form that's been submitted by a community member, normally one of our customers, and I'll go through the process of building out core components of that form. Joining me today is going to be MJ Nzgoda. He's going to be fielding questions that come in through the chat, and I will be presenting the actual form building portion of this webinar. A couple of items in terms of keeping up with what we are doing. You should have received a news announcement recently over the with bug fixes and other enhancements and just kind of what's going on feature-wise with our software. But in addition to that, we're actively involved in blogging communities. We have our own blog called the Data Management Digest, which can be found on our website at blog.zerionsoftware.com. We also have an active community forum where you're able to post items on new things. That includes this community webinar. You're also able to post requests in terms of iFormBuilder features, as well as integration features, and just keep in touch with other users of the software to see what they're doing and ask them for help. Finally, we also have an active presence on the blogging site called Medium. We have a channel dedicated for our engineering team as well as our customer success team. So I would encourage everybody to check those out. Finally, we have a variety of different social media channels, and I would also encourage you to subscribe or to like our posts on any one of these. In particular, I want to highlight our YouTube channel, where you're going to be able to find videos of previous webinars, also short videos that we have in terms of building out different components of your forms, as well as the integrations that are available. Now, before I move into the actual content of the webinar where we go through the form building, I did want to put up a couple of polls. This first poll I'm going to be launching is simply going to ask whether you're a current user or not. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close out this poll. And I've got one more poll I'd like to launch before we get into the form building. And this is going to be asking everybody about their level of expertise with the iFormBuilder software. I'm going to close out this poll. And with all of that having been done, let's go ahead and jump into this month's webinar. So I've talked about the format of this webinar a little bit. I'm going to go over very briefly before we talk through our actual form for this month. So the first way you're able to interact with us within this webinar's format is to actually post your form request in the community. So over here, I'm going to jump over to my browser, and you'll notice I have a community post here. This post is going to outline the format of the webinar, how you're able to participate. It will also have a link for registration. So if you need to, you can just bookmark this one page and sign up for the webinar every month. And then it'll also have a list of all the broadcasts down here. So we've done this webinar February, March, April, and May. You'll notice that the webinar is always going to be done on the second Tuesday of every month. So it makes it a little bit easier to plan. Now for each episode, I have not only the actual form that was submitted, I'll also have a form package available for download and import into your environment. So you can see what work I do. You can build off of it if you would like as well. And then also a link to the recording of that month's webinar on YouTube. The next way you can interact is you can actually be here where you are right now, registering and joining these monthly webinars. Now, if you're unable to actually attend the live session of the webinar, I still encourage you to sign up each month. You'll be notified each month of the recording that gets released. It's also a nice way for you all to give us some feedback to make the webinar a better experience every month. During the webinar, as well as after the webinar, we encourage you to ask questions to us, either through the GoToWebinar chat or afterwards. Absolutely feel free to add comments to this community post. And then through that, either myself, someone else on the team, or even someone in the community may be able to answer your question. And then finally, if you have a topic or a challenge that requires a little bit more in-depth conversation, absolutely feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to us at sales@zerionsoftware.com, support@zerionsoftware.com. You can post in the other community forums, and then we also have an online chat, which is an easy way to get a hold of one of our chat agents immediately. They'll either be able to answer your question outright, or they'll connect you with the right person to get the information and answer the questions that you have. All right, so with that being said, I want to first extend a very big thank you to Tozer Seeds of America. They are the group who sent me this form and actually gave me permission to work on this form and demonstrate this on the webinar. Tozer and myself have been working over the last couple months on redesigning their data collection flow and adding in a lot of best practices for their data collection. I approached them and I told them this would be an excellent opportunity to share the learning that we've gone through with the rest of the iFormBuilder community, and they obliged. So thank you so much, Tozer. Now, this is the portion of the form that I wanted to share with you all today and that we're going to be building. Now let me talk about this form. Because we are going through the process of redesigning their current iFormBuilder forms, there wasn't a paper form for me to take a screenshot of here. Now the way this form works is we have what's called a parent form, and they are going to fill out a trial for a crop. And so what they're doing is they're going and inspecting a list of crops. Now we're only going to focus on one specific crop today. I chose broccoli because that was the one we worked on most recently. And you'll notice that at the parent level, they have information such as a timestamp, who the grower is, in what region they reside in, as well as a map location. We'll also have classification of the crop, an estimated harvest date, and then a trial type. Now this is important here because what happens is Tozer has two different types of surveys that they're going to be filling out. They will have a full survey, which is going to be more extensive. It asks all the different questions that are required to be answered, but they also have a short form survey that really hits the highlights of the data collection needs, and it's going to be able to be filled out a little bit faster. So that's a key distinction and a key characteristic of this form, is the ability to have one form be able to handle both full and short version. Now here's my broccoli subform. So these are going to be fields specific to this type of crop. A couple things I want to highlight. At the bottom here, you'll see that there's an assessment by, and this is going to be the actual iFormBuilder username of whoever is logged in. This way they know who filled out this record. Additionally, you'll see that there are a series of 1 to 5 ratings here. And so for each of these different data points, what's going to be recorded is a score from 1 to 5, where 1 is going to be a low score and 5 is going to be a high score. And on the right-hand side, you'll notice that each of the data collection points is identified as being for both, meaning full and short, or some are only for full, so this means this is not to be shown during short. And then lastly, we'll have a variety code as well as a plot number. So these are just some additional elements that are going to be included. Now in terms of our plan for today, the way we're going to go about this is we're going to start by building out the parent form. Afterwards, we're going to build out our option list, our 1 to 5 option list. We're going to do the subform, and then finally we're going to do some advanced form building techniques that work with both parent and subform. Now in terms of the setup I have for my workspace, you'll notice here I'm going to have my iFormBuilder control panel open in one tab. Under Forms, I'm going to go down to Form Builder. It opens up my Form Builder in a second tab. Now, in anticipation of knowing that I need to work with an option list later on, I'm also going to open the option list manager in a new tab as well. So I can work with my option list, I can work with my forms here. I also have my device mirrored to my screen here. So you'll see I have my iPad open right here. I have previous webinar forms are on this environment, and we're going to be building out the one for this month now. So let's go ahead and get this started. Let's go ahead and click on Create Form. And I'm going to name this form Crop Trial. I'm going to uncheck based on label because what I want to do is use a naming convention where I identify this as a parent form. The lowercase p stands for parent. The subform that I build later on is going to be the child form. I'm also going to put in a quick timestamp here so that we know which date this form was built. I'll scroll down, click on Create, and it's going to load up my form builder here. Now for those of you who are brand new, you'll notice that there are 3 main sections of this form builder. On the left-hand side, we have a list of all our elements, also referred to as widgets sometimes. These are what your form is going to be comprised of. In the middle, we're going to have a list of all elements involved in the form. And on the right-hand side, we'll have the properties for each element that I have selected at any given time. Now to build out this form, the first thing I want to do is add my DateTime element. This is going to be for the trial date, and I'm going to go ahead and call this trial timestamp. Now the difference between my label and my name is that the label is the text that you'll actually see on the device, and we'll take a look at that in a second. The name, however, is going to be the identifier for this element within the form, as well as the database table where all the records are stored. So this name has to follow a few naming conventions here. It has to be what's called database friendly, meaning all lowercase values, no spaces, and no special characters. I'm going to go up here in the upper right corner and save my form real quickly. I'm also going to go ahead and go to my device, sync my device, and you'll see it's going to download the form. Now I'm going through this process for two reasons. One, I want to show what a sync looks like early on in the broadcast. The second reason is, as a best practice, I tend to save fairly frequently as I'm form building. It allows me to identify when a mistake happens, if a mistake happens, right away. So we're going to open up this form, our trial form, and you'll notice there's our trial date. Notice that the label text here is what is shown on the form, not the data column name. If I enter into this element by selecting it, you'll see I can choose the date and the time, and I can press select. And if I were to press done, that would complete my record. So simple process. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and continue building out inside of our form. The next thing I want to add are two text elements. So I'm going to click text twice. The first one, we're going to call this the grower. And the second one, we're going to name this region. Now, as I go to save this form, I'm going to go ahead and sync my device again. And you'll see that the new form changes are going to be downloaded. And I'm not going to fill out the entire form, but I just want to show you what this looks like with multiple fields here now. For trial date, it's going to show you the radio buttons, or the radial dials rather. And then for grower, and then as well as region, it would open up this window here where you're able to enter in text. Now for the purposes of this webinar, in order to keep everything fitting within the time window, I wasn't able to incorporate this form building technique, but one of the things I had spoken with Tozer about was that both grower and region, because they are able to define a list of growers who they work with, as well as regions in which they work in, I recommended to them that these both actually be option-based elements, so they would end up being a pick list because it's a longer list of defined growers and defined regions. That would enable their data collection to be a little bit more high level. It would give it a higher aspect of data integrity, and then this way they don't have to worry about things like misspellings or entering something in with a different abbreviation. All right, let's go ahead and keep on building. We're going to add in a location element here, and this is going to be called GPS. Actually, we'll call this map location, my mistake. And what I want to do here is show you all what this looks like when I open it on the device. Now, as I sync and pull up my form, MJ, I just wanted to check in with you very briefly. Are there any questions that have come in that I might be able to answer for the rest of the audience?
No, John, we are good so far.
Okay, awesome. So let's go ahead and hop over here to my device. Let me sync. So the element I just added, the location widget, is going to allow you to capture GPS coordinates. Now, if you see here, this is a larger window. As I tap into here, it's going to give me both a small map that zooms in, as well as the ability to refresh my GPS location. When I press done, you'll see that information is captured in the element. Now, what's nice about the location element is that it does work offline, as long as your phone or tablet will have a GPS chip in it that captures GPS information, so you don't need to have cell signal in order to get this information. I do want to take a moment to note that all of our elements are actually going to work in an offline mode, so that's going to enable you to have data collection where you download the forms, you can go offline for a period of time, fill out records, and then when you come back into an area of connectivity, you can then upload the records to the cloud at that point. All right, let's go ahead and keep on building. We're going to add in just a date element here for the estimated harvest date. And at this point, what I want to note is that this is going to be a little bit different than our original timestamp. This is going to be a date in the future, whereas most likely the trial date is going to be both the current date and the current time. In order to speed up data collection, what I want to do is I'm actually going to take this timestamp down here in the dynamic value, one of our smart controls. I want to default this to the current timestamp so that I don't need to go in and fill it in, unless maybe I'm creating a record that was executed in the past that I need to backfill. In order to do this, I'm going to type in the word date with 2 parentheses. Now, this is not an iFormBuilder specific command. This is actually a JavaScript command. For those of you with a programming background, you will be happy to know that the iFormBuilder software uses JavaScript behind the scenes, and what it's going to allow you to do is really a lot of creative functionalities using JavaScript if you have that skill set to have forms that are going to be tremendously advanced. Now, if you're not familiar with JavaScript, or you've never coded before in your life, or you maybe have a very, very introductory level understanding of JavaScript, not a problem either. One of the nice things we've done is we have each of these different smart control sections, your dynamic value, which handles the actual input of the element. Condition value handles the visibility of the element. Client validation, validation message are going to be validations against the entry of data before the record is submitted. So we have these different sections. So what you can start doing is start learning individual techniques, looking up on our documentation in our Customer Success Center. And then from there, slowly build a base of knowledge. And then what we've seen a lot of times is actually customers will take that base of knowledge and be able to grow on top of it and then build these skills that you'll see other advanced form builders have. Now from here, we're going to add in one more element before I sync my device and take a look. I want to add in a trial type. Now the trial type is going to be one of 2 choices, either full or short. So that means it's going to be an option-based element. I want to use a select element this time. I'm going to call this trial type. And the reason I'm using a select element is because my list is fairly short. Now I scroll down here on the right-hand side. I'm going to click on Option List to open up the inline manager. I want to create a new list. We can call this crop trial types. Click and create. Let's go ahead and find my option list. And let's make our option-based element here. So I want full as the label, and I actually want the key value to mimic it in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in both of them. Click on my check mark. You'll notice these are yellow right now. I don't want to assign selected right away. I'm actually going to hop up here, click on save to make sure I save these changes. Background turns white, and now I can jump down here, click on assign selected. And I'm going to go up here now and save my form. MJ, as I do this, I'm going to check in one more time. Have any questions come in from any of the audience members?
Yes, John. When it comes to the mapping feature, is there any way to make that a required field?
Yeah, definitely. So before I go ahead and hop over to my device, let's do this right now. So if I click on my location element, over here under element properties, you'll notice there's an attribute for required. If I hover over this tooltip, you'll see that it says the user must input a value into the element before being allowed to submit the record to the server. If I just enable this, you'll notice there's a little red asterisk here indicating it's required. Let me save this, and now I'll sync my device one more time. We'll take a look over here after it's been downloaded. We'll open up my form, and you'll notice that there is a small asterisk next to map location. If I were to try to submit this record, you'll see it tells me that the field is required, and so I'm not able to submit this without having picked my GPS location. So now once I do this, I'd be able to submit my record. MJ, are there any other questions I'll be able to answer at this time?
Yes. With regards to the location input type, some of the folks here have gotten, when they've hit the location button, have actually gotten zeros on the location itself. Is there any way, whether it's through JavaScript or a conditional statement, that if all zeros appear, you can't submit the record, something has to be looked at?
Yeah, that can be done. So that's a bit of a I know that we've heard that before, it's kind of a niche requirement, but one of the things we'd be able to do is inside the location element, under client validation, we would be able to write validation statements in order to get that to work. Now, the thing is with the validation statements, you've got to be kind of precise with them. I would want to work directly with whoever is having this issue so that we can get a exact validation for their specific needs, because there's a couple of different ways we can do this. I've written validations for this to be if it's empty. I've written validations where if the GPS chip isn't working, effectively getting zeros returned like you were describing. I've also written validations where you have to be within a certain distance from a specified location. So that's going to be called geofencing. And so then what happens is if you fill out a record and you're not in your prescribed area, it won't let you submit that record. So again, a lot of different validations we can do. I would like to take that conversation offline if possible to help them with their validation later
on. Okay, perfect. Thank you, John.
Anything else?
No, that's it for now.
Awesome. So let's hop back over here to my form. You'll notice I added in the estimated harvest date, which is going to be just my date radio dials, so month, day, year. You'll notice up here at trial date, this was already filled in by default. And so that's what I was talking about. Now I don't need to worry about that field when I'm filling out this record. And then down below, you'll see we have our select element where I can choose either full or short. All right, so now let's go ahead and move forward. The next thing on our agenda for our form building is to build the option list that we need for our broccoli form. Now I'm hopping over here to my option list manager. I'm going to create a new list, just like the way I made a form. Now I'm going to call this rating scale 1 to 5. Now the nice thing about this is I'm going to be able to use this single option list that I make across all the different elements within my form. So I'm going to go ahead and define this list very quickly here. Click on my check mark and save it. Now you'll notice that there's both a label as well as a key value here. The label is going to be the text that's shown on the device. The key value is going to be the text that is stored in the database. Now in this scenario, we want them to be the exact same thing, so I'm going to set it this way. If, for example, you had something like a list of employees, you may have their name as a label, but you actually want to store their employee ID, you can set that in as the key value. So just to give you an example of when those two might be different. From here, we're going to hop back over to the form builder. I'm actually going to make a new tab again with the form builder because I want to create my subform now. Now a subform is just going to be a way of invoking a form as an element of another form. In order to set this up, the first thing I need to do is actually build out my subform as a standalone form. Then I'll build the connection at the very end. So I'm going to click on create form. I'm going to uncheck based on label. I'm going to call this crop trial broccoli. And I'm going to call this crop trial. I'm going to use an _C representing a child form, broccoli. So this naming convention is going to do two things. One, it's going to help me identify that this is a child form based on the naming convention. The second thing is because the list of forms behind me is listed alphabetically, it's going to actually group the forms together, which makes it a lot easier when you're looking through a list of forms. Now, as I save this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first add in my select element. We're going to call this overall score. I'm going to turn on based on label because these are going to be pretty straightforward. They're going to mimic the label text here. I'm going to jump down here to my option list and I'm going to assign my range scale 1 to 5. Assign selected. I'm going to save this. Now, let me go ahead and sync my device. And what we're going to see is that the new form I made is actually listed on the home screen. So if I want to jump into my crop trial broccoli form, I can do that. And you'll see just the single 1 through 5 overall score. Now, because I don't want that to happen, because I want to reference this form as a subform, a part of the overall crop trial data collection, I need to do a few things. The first thing is I'm going to go to my parent form. Let me first add a divider to separate these sections. And I'm going to add a subform element. Now the subform element, I'm going to give it a label. We're going to call this broccoli. And down here, as a subform, I also need to pick the form that I'm going to be opening up. So in this case, I'm going to choose crop trial C broccoli. Now my link mode below is going to define the way in which this form is referenced as a subform. Now right now it's defaulted to single, which means that for each parent form I create, each parent record, I'm only going to be able to fill in the broccoli form one time. This is called a one-to-one relationship. If I were to choose multiple, then what that means is I could fill out the broccoli subform multiple times for one parent. Now in this context, single is going to make sense, so I'm going to leave this here. Separate view, if I were to check this off, enabling it, it would show the little table that you've seen so far on my device as a separate view. It would literally show it as a separate portion of the form instead of showing in line. Now because this is a single paging form, I actually like to keep this disabled so that you'll see that one row in line with my parent record. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now the next thing I want to do is I actually change my form assignments. So under form assignment, I'm going to uncheck my child form having collect rights. What this is going to do is it's not going to show up on my home screen, so I'm unable to actually reference that form directly. I'll only be able to take a look at that form as a subform record. Now, to show you what this looks like, let me go ahead and clean my local database real quickly. And then we will resync the device. You'll see that as it re-downloads, it's only going to download the first 4 forms. The subform is going to be downloaded as specifically a subform. All right, so here you'll see that the broccoli subform is no longer available. If I click into crop trial though, I will be able to reference the form as a subform, as an element of the parent form. And so that's how this is going to be created. Now let's say we pick a 2 and I say done. You'll notice that you'll see overall score in line. There's that separate view versus not having a separate view on my form. Now, the next thing we're going to do is going back to, let me go back to the data model so we can all refresh. We've added this overall score. Let me go ahead and add in these fields now: plant height, uniformity, leaf color, mildew, and so on. And then I'm also going to add this assessment by. So we're going to add in all the elements that we need onto the form. To do this in a quicker fashion, what I'm actually going to do is take this overall score, because it has my rating scale selected already. I'm actually going to duplicate it by doing this. So I'll click here to copy this element, and all I need to do now is change my label. So this one is going to be plant height. I'll duplicate it again. Plant uniformity, leaf color, mildew. Let me add in these other ones. While I'm doing this, MJ, are there any questions that have come in that I'd be able to answer?
Yes, this is regarding two questions regarding the option list. First, you had mentioned that once an option list is built once, it's available across all the elements within the form. Just to confirm for the rest of the group here, that is also available across multiple forms within your profile, correct?
Correct, yeah. So right now what I'm doing is I'm using this 1 through 5 option list inside of this form multiple times, but the other dimension that you can reuse that option list is across multiple forms. So as I said earlier at the beginning of the webinar, broccoli is just one crop that Tozer works with. They're actually using this 1 through 5 option list across all the different crops that they have. And so they have one option list that's effectively collecting literally hundreds of data points, but they only had to define it one time.
Perfect. And then the second part on the option list is John, you showed two ways of building an option list. Once in the form builder here, and once on the actual option list builder. Is there any pros or cons to building inside the form builder versus building in the option list builder?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So working in the inline manager, think of that as kind of a shortcut. It's going to give you access to a limited amount of functionalities working with an option list. It's really good for what I did during this webinar where I made a short option list. It was new. I had to create it, add a couple of options to it, save and assign. Now, if you have a longer list of options, then my recommendation is to use the option list manager. One, it's going to give you a little bit more screen space to work with. But one of the other things that I want to highlight is that you're also able to do what's called a raw upload, where you can type in a bunch of values here. A lot of times I copy and paste things from a longer Word file or something like that. Or you can actually do a CSV upload where you can download an example. You can fill this out inside of Excel, save it as a CSV file, and upload it. And that's going to give you not only the fastest way to create a large list of options, but then you also have the Excel file to save in the event you want to make modifications to your option list values. Then you can make the changes in Excel. You can re-upload, empty, and replace the options so that you have the new list of options. And then that's going to be a lot faster than making the changes manually.
Perfect. John, that's all for now.
Awesome. All right, let me go back over to my subform here. I have filled out all of these different select elements. And then lastly, I'm going to add in my read-only assessment by. And I'm going to jump down here. I'm going to use what's called an iFormBuilder built-in function to specify the username of who was filling out this record. Now, the username along with first name, last name, and email are available for you to use in a similar fashion. All of that information can be found on the Customer Success Center. I happen to have just memorized them from doing this on a day-to-day basis. But if you do a quick search for built-in functions on the Customer Success Center on our help desk, you'll be able to find the information as well. Here I've synced my form. I'm going to open up my crop trial form, and you'll notice I have my default trial date, grower region. I can again show us the GPS element. I'll do a full trial. Let's hop into this broccoli subform. You'll notice we have the list of selects, and you can fit a lot of them on the screen. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was how to collect data in a way that is both precise as well as fast. Using selects for short, repeated decision points like this is one of the best ways in order to quickly fill out values just by the touch of a button. So this is a really nice way to do this. And for each of these data points, if we want to add some descriptive text, for example, next to overall score, we may want to indicate really what is a 1 versus a 5 versus a 3. You can add that in the label text so that the data collector has an easier time with their judgment calls. You'll notice at the bottom, assessment by, that is the username I have logged into the device with. I cannot edit this. And so that is a point of data integrity that's going to allow us to make sure we know who's filling out this record. If I press on done, I will have submitted my subform. I press done on my parent. My parent form is completed. I can sync my device, and that record is now going to be uploaded to the cloud. Now at this point, I've built out the primary bulk of my form. The next thing I wanted to do was go through a couple of advanced form building techniques. Now the first thing is that understanding that each of the forms, whether we're talking about our crop trial parent or our broccoli subform, these are stored independently as separate tables. Now what happens is the metadata connects the records together so that you can stitch a full data collection point in its entirety. However, you are able to look just at broccoli if you want without crop trial. And in fact, when you do an export of the data, if any of you have done an Excel export before, you'll notice that each form or each table is its own sheet. And so a lot of the times it's very helpful to have some of the parent information inside of the subform record, and that's what I want to demonstrate for us now. What I want us to do is to take the trial type, and we're going to move it down into the subform level. So we're going to move something from parent to child. So I'm going to hop over here and go to my parent. Now the points that we need to identify are one, the form's name, so the table name. This is going to be important. And then the other thing is going to be the data column name of the element I want to pass down, trial type. Now I'm going to go to my subform. The first thing I want to do is at the top of this form, I'm going to add a read-only. Go ahead and move this up here. And we're going to call this trial type. I'm going to call this, oops, I have my face on label. I'm going to call this broccoli trial type. And in the dynamic value, I'm going to be entering in some commands so that I take that parent value and I pull it down to the child. Now what I want to do is start off with the form name. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here. I'm going to use a period called the dot operator or the accessor operator. So within the parent form, I want to access the property or the value of trial type here. Now I've put this inside of a read-only because I don't want this to be changed. I want this to be a static value in that sense, where the data collector is not going to be able to press full at the parent level, jump in here, and then choose short. Let me go ahead and save this, and we'll take a look at how this is. Hop back over here to my device. If I hop into my subform, you'll notice that, whoops, I actually didn't fill out trial type, my mistake here. Let's fill out full. Let's go back over here. And now I need to go back and I need to start this record over. Open this up one more time. Choose full, go into broccoli. It's not showing up. Let's take a look and see what I need to do here. Oh, I know what the issue is. Inside of trial type, one of the things that you'll have to do sometimes is add a default value here. So I always recommend doing default values for elements that I'm going to be passing values in. This way, even at the onset of the form being created, you won't run into any issues of it not being able to reference a value. As I resync my device and I open this up, MJ, are there any questions that have come through?
All good right now, John.
Okay, give me 1 second here. Open up my form. Oops, gotta go ahead and show my screen too.
Oh, actually, John, just had a very interesting question come in.
Yep.
Can a timer be set in the database and the trial date be used to check to see if the time lapsed since the last trial? Then have the form choose full or short based on that time check.
Okay, so they want to have the time set up on in the server and then look to see what the difference is between the last record. Am I reading that correctly?
Let me confirm. Yes.
Okay, so that's going to be a little bit difficult. One of the key design features here is that we always try to emphasize offline. And so features like that where we're effectively pinging or querying the server in order to get information may be a little bit difficult to implement. My recommendation would be to keep records on the device. So there are different synchronization settings that you can configure. For example, you can choose to not delete on upload, and then you can actually create records based on the last record created. And then you can have a field in that does the difference. So that would be my recommendation of how to implement that. The other suggestion.
Okay, perfect. And then,
go ahead.
Good. No, so go ahead, John. I apologize.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say the other recommendation I would have there is wherever you're eventually reporting on your data, whether that's an Excel export or reporting software, I would recommend making the calculations there as well. Now, I understand that's not going to be able to impact the data collection because you want to have that field switched based on it, but it would be a good way to do the calculation in a little bit more secure fashion.
Okay. And then, John, just had a second question come in here. Actually, a really interesting one on the smart table search. Say you had 100 plus growers that you wanted to visit and collect data from. Is there an easy way to pre-fill data in the parent and subforms based off the grower's name?
Yeah, there definitely is. So based on the grower's name, what I would recommend at that point is instead of doing a option list, you'd want to use what's called a smart table search, right? And so for each of the different columns, you'd be able to specify those static values. And then depending on who is selected, you would have access to the data in that row's entirety so that you could then populate those fields based on it.
And now with the smart table search as well, to confirm, once you pick your unique identifier and pre-populate, you can pre-populate on the parent form as well as pass to the subform if that's set up correctly.
Yep, absolutely. You can, and I've actually done that very recently on a form that I built. I had all the values in the smart table search populate on the parent. I put them all in the read-only elements, and I actually set the condition value to false so they wouldn't be shown. And then I would take those values and I'd pull them down to each of the subforms as necessary.
Perfect. That seems to be all the questions for now, John. Thanks.
All right. So now as I was answering those questions, I noticed what my mistake was here. When I was referencing the select, I was actually accessing the index value. What I wanted to do, in fact, instead is reference the key value here. So I'm going to add in this command. We're going to go ahead and resync my device and take a look at this and see how this goes. Now, as this is filling out, I know I'm starting to run a little bit short on time. I am still going to do this last technique because it's very important. But what I want to go through is the fact that at the end of this webinar, I will be, this is still not showing up. Interesting. I'm actually not sure why this isn't working. We'll see here. But I will be releasing a recording of the webinar within 48 hours, and then that's going to be something that you're able to download, to reference again. And then also I'll be answering any questions that people send in through email. All right, I don't want to spend too much time sitting here to debug this. Oh, I actually think I know what the issue may be. I think it may be that the data column names are in conflict. But we're going to keep on moving forward. I don't want to take up the entire time of this webinar trying to debug this right now. The last thing I wanted to do was actually do the condition values. So what I wanted to show you, and I'll show you this kind of in theory, is with a condition value, if you have it set to true or it evaluates to true, that's when the element is going to be shown. Whereas if you have the condition value expressed to false, that's when it would be hidden. To demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in false for the overall score. Let me save this and sync my device, and you'll notice that it's going to be hidden. Now, this is a way of manually always making sure that the element will not be shown. So if I open this up again, let's start a new record. And I hop down here to my broccoli subform. Overall score will not be shown. You'll notice it just has trial type. Now what that's going to allow me to do is, for this, for example, if I wanted to have a value always hidden, I can set it to false. Now, if I wanted to have a value shown conditionally, I can put an expression in here. So for example, if I have my, my overall score, let's say I want to have plant height only display if overall score is above a certain threshold, or if it's actually under a threshold. Let's do under. We're going to say here, if ZC display key overall score is equal to 1, then we're going to have this show. So I just want to show a real quick example here as we're short on time. While I'm loading this up, MJ, I'm going to actually, for the final time, ask if there are any questions that have come through.
We are good to go right now.
All right, excellent. Let me go ahead and close out this record. My app seems to be behaving kind of strangely. It won't let me close this out. I'm going to quickly fill this out. And now let's go ahead and delete this record, delete this record. All right, let me sync my device here. Hop down here to my broccoli subform. And then if we set overall score to 1, you'll notice plant height shows up. If we have it anything else, it's not going to show. It'll be hidden. So here plant height is shown, and then it's hidden. So this is a nice way to restrict what's going to be visible on your form. We call this skip logic as a way of hiding and showing elements that only need to be filled out. So they'll only be shown when they should be filled out. Otherwise, they will be hidden. All right. The last thing I want to talk through this webinar very quickly is I wanted to recap briefly and go through some best practices and strategies. These are just going to be highlights of some of the techniques that I went through today. The first one is you want to default fields. This is going to allow you to accelerate your data collection. We saw this with the crop trial timestamp. You want to use the built-in functions anytime possible to dynamically grab values from the app. We saw this when I did the iFormBuilder.username. Again, first name, last name, and email address are the other 3 built-in functions that are available to capture user data. We want to conditionally hide and show elements, specifically hide elements that are not going to be used. This is going to make sure that the form is as short as possible for the data collector to fill out. We'll want to use select elements for short range answers, such as the 1 through 5. This gives us a very flexible way to reuse one list, whether that's going to be in multiple elements in one form, or you can use that option list across multiple forms. So you get a lot of use out of one set of options. And then finally, you want to pass data between the parent and child records. That was where I had a little bit of difficulty today passing the value down, but that's going to allow you to make sure that you have a comprehensive data set in your subform, so you don't need to go back to the parent to identify that information. I want to go ahead and thank MJ for hosting the webinar and fielding questions today. I want to thank everybody on the broadcast for joining in. Again, we're going to be releasing a recording within the next 48 hours, so stay tuned to the community post to get that. And then our next webinar is going to be in June, again, second Tuesday of the month. Until then, my name is Jonathan Su. Thank you again for joining the webinar, and have a great rest of the day.